Okay guys, this video is gonna get a little bit weird, but I'm kind of starting to think that there might potentially be a third and final power system being introduced in One Piece right now. Because ever since Saint Saturn unleashed his crazy demon form, something has really been feeling off. Not just to me, to a bunch of people. And I've talked about it before when those chapters were dropping, of course, but chapters 1138 and 39 have really got me thinking that all of this really isn't devil fruits. And that potentially Luffy might be about to train with my man here, Scopper Gaban, to actually defeat some literal demons. So let's chat here a little bit, because I kind of want to figure out what is actually going on for real with those unholy powers of the Holy Knights, the Gorosei, and possibly, of course, Imu themselves. And looking back on it all, this kind of really all came to a head in chapter 1110 here. If you don't remember, that was the chapter when all of the Gorosei unleashed their massive true forms, and it's really important to note for this video that all of them appeared without the classic devil fruit text boxes. Now, most of them all seem to be based on various yokai, a type of evil spirit creature typically appearing in Japanese folklore. For instance, looking here, we've got the classics like the Itsumade, the Bakotsu, and the Gyuki, but of course, I could never forget everyone's favorite Japanese demon, the Shai-Halut, the great sandworm of Arrakis. Now, unfortunately, there's one big problem here for Luffy. Turns out he's probably not the Lisan al-Gahib, and so he can't actually touch the Great Sandworm, or really any of the Gorosei's true demons forms for that matter. And if all the Dune reference were totally lost on you there, well, what I'm basically getting at is that these demon forms are insanely broken and creepily powerful. Like, we're talking abnormally strong even for a One Piece villain. Because unlike someone like Kaido, who's insanely tanky, or even Blackbeard, who can straight up nullify devil fruit powers with his darkness powers, these beasts were just straight up unbeatable, unscratchable. Now, just for the record, they did end up taking damage, but they just straight up didn't care. They just didn't seem to freaking stay down no matter what. Seriously, I don't know what Imu has been feeding these things, but Luffy and Zoro were throwing Conqueror Haki-infused attacks at them, and they just healed up instantly like it was nobody's business. And so I kind of feel like if these powers were actually devil fruits, strong Haki like Luffy's and Zoro's should absolutely really hurt those things. I mean, we've seen that you don't need crazy amounts of Haki to nullify devil fruit powers before, like how Law just raised his Haki up to break the feminine disease that he was given in the same arc. And so to me, all of this really points to the idea that these powers are not devil fruits. Actually, now that I kind of think about it, I guess that's not fully the case. There was actually one thing that did seem to mess with them, and that was, of course, Joy Boy's crazy Haki blast. If you don't remember what I'm talking about, Emmet here, the giant robot, unleashed a giant Haki knot that was hidden inside of his chest, and that thing broke the Gorosei, and actually Imu for that matter as well. So this is really the first ever big thing that we can try and break down here. Why in the world did Joy Boy's Haki seem to affect the Gorosei when Luffy, in his Gear 5 Nika form, with advanced Conqueror's Haki and Ryo attacks, couldn't do anything? Now, I don't know about you, but something does feel super weird and off about all of that to me. Like, Imu feeling Joy Boy's Haki from that far away on the other side of the world is truly a feat unlike anything we've seen in the series. And as much as I want to invest in those Joy Boy stocks and really hype the guy up, I don't actually think that Imu felt that Haki from that far away. And especially after reading chapter 1138, I do think we may have the first bit of context that might explain how these demon powers actually work. Like, you see the left side of this giant mural? Well, as we talked about in depth in another video, it does seem to line up pretty perfectly with the second world of the Harley text, and I myself, among many other people, have decided that this is representative of the Battle of the Void Century, where, you know, we all assume Imu fought Joy Boy and his army. I want to say, do you see how big and scary Imu is here? They're this massive demon-shaped winged dragon whatever thing fighting against an entire army, and we know that they actually won this. For all we know, Joy Boy died, guys, and so probably did pretty much everyone else that fought alongside him. And while maybe some of you are more skeptical and might try and say that this is just artistic flair from the mural artist to make Imu appear like that, I kind of feel like I need to push a little bit back on that idea and remind you that Imu's giant form that they use against Sabo is a very real thing that we've seen before. To me, it really seems like Imu just literally is this massively hellish beast, like for real. Okay, but why is any of this important? And why would that explain the demon powers? Well, to be quite honest, I don't really think that Emu would be scared of Joy Boy's haki. Back when this scene happened, I kind of figured, man, maybe Joy Boy is kind of just giga broken. And I don't think I was alone in that thought, but I'm really not all that sure anymore about this. Because after seeing just how crazy powerful Emu is depicted here, it just doesn't seem like a hockey blast would knock Emu to their knees like that halfway across the world and then cause them to sweat just like they do right here. I mean, seriously, look at Emu when they react to that hockey. They look terrified or exhausted. And so I think that that might actually be the correct way to interpret that panel now. I don't think that Emu was necessarily scared of Joy Boy's hockey. I think it caught them off guard and thus impacted their own demonic powers. Remember, we now basically know that Emu can telepathically communicate with the Gorosei as they mind link up with Saturn to tell him that he's about to die before, you know, hitting him with basically an Amaterasu-like attack by burning him to crisps from thousands of kilometers away. Pretty badass scene, by the way. But to me, when you really factor in all of that, the demon forms themselves and how the Gorosei are truly terrified of Emu, I'm kind of starting to lean towards the idea that Emu is actually capable of granting people demonic powers, making all of their own forms tied directly to Emu themselves as well. Basically, if they take damage, Emu can heal it, but if Joy Boy's epic god tier giga level haki hits them, even Emu will have to feel it as well since they are directly connected and linked. And if that were to be the case, the sweat beads on their head make a lot more sense because it's probably taking a lot of stamina to teleport 5 of those guys all the way to Egghead, then maintain their demon forms, heal them all the time, and then tank that massive blast of Vitamin Joy Boy to the face as well. Like, that explanation makes so much more sense to me when you really look at the Harley and the mural here. The Earth God Emu, or at least that's how I've been kind of taking it, seems to be immortal for all that we know and uses the Serpent of Hellflame to battle Nika in the first world, I think what's happening here. And I kind of came to this conclusion because of the wording of the Harley and how it seems to frame both the Earth God and the Serpent against Nika. And I hope we can all agree that Emu just seems like the most likely and obvious candidate here. Them or one of their ancestors at least. And we can see this because a bunch of the slaves that are going down here into the planet to bring up what we can infer are pieces of the Eternal Flame or the Forbidden Sun. And then they use that Forbidden Sun from deep within the Earth to battle the Ancient Kingdom in the second world as well. Now, in the present timeline, what is assumed to be the third world from the Harley text, we now have a bunch of these holy people, these saints with demonic powers, and they all worship and work for Emu, and all the depictions of Emu from history are a big, scary demonic entity with ties to hell and the center of the earth. So really, when you put it down on paper, it does sound a lot like Emu is a literal demonic being from hell, the underworld, and I just think that Oda took that term a little bit too seriously and that Emu's powers are from under the world, aka the Forbidden Sun. Now, thematically, this would also make a lot of sense considering that Emu is the foil of Nika, so they should be polar opposites, right? Nika is the sun god from heaven, the warrior of liberation, so it only makes a lot of sense, I think, that Emu is the earth god, as above so below, from hell, you know, basically the great oppressor, and the exact opposite of that. Also, a little fun fact here that backs up this idea is that Pluto, or Hades, while being the ruler of the underworld, are actually also considered of the earth. They are earth deities on top of the evil hell lords, and that's kind of giving really major Emu vibes here as well. But don't worry, I kind of know that you're not super convinced quite yet, and I definitely can see the comments like, Manu, no. Emu is Umi backwards. Emu is the sea god. Theory debunked. And sure, like maybe, but I kind of really don't think the evidence points in that direction at all anymore. For example, if Emu was named Umi, that train of thought would be undeniable, but their name is not Umi, it's Emu. It's the opposite of Emu. And so it's just as fair to say, I think, that Emu is the earth god because earth is opposite to the sea. I've actually been having that thought for a while now, and to me, the Harley and the mural do seem to point towards that idea as well, I think. But there's also another glaring piece of evidence that I've been neglecting from chapter 1138, and now I think is the best time to really talk about it. I'm talking about this daddy right here, Figureland Shamrock, because Shanks' big brother was the real reason that I wanted to make this video to begin with, because his powers are truly gnarly. Like, he can turn his own sword into a Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld, and that's honestly like just the coolest thing that I have seen in a while in anime and manga, like all together. And I'm kind of gonna get into why that power specifically I think is so important, important, but I kind of want to focus also on what didn't happen in this chapter as well, because it's what really caught me off guard here. You see, Shamrock's devil fruit wasn't confirmed at all. We straight up don't still know if he actually has a devil fruit power, and as I'm pretty sure you can tell, I think that's because he actually does not have a devil fruit. Now sure, one could make absolutely the case that Oda just straight up doesn't want to confirm the fruit yet, same for the Gorosei, and I can't really argue with that logic right now, but I can point out that he did weirdly enough confirm that Gunko, out of all people, the person with Shamrock, very much does have a devil fruit, and did confirm what it was in the same chapter that he used his as well, so that's already a bit weird. But on top of that, there's also something else that I think is really important, because we in fact did not get confirmation that Gunko here was a celestial dragon as well, and instead just got confirmation that she was a holy knight. And just to summarize, that means that we've now seen 6 celestial dragons use crazy demon powers without Oda ever calling out that they were devil fruit users, and 1 holy knight who may very well not be a celestial dragon with an actual devil fruit power. Now, technically, Loki does seem to confirm that non-celestial dragons can become celestial dragons when they're taken on as holy knights, but this kind of only goes to further my point about pure-blooded, real celestial dragons actually getting true, real demon powers, as it's kind of implied that Loki has eaten the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, right? Now, if it was just Saturn and Shamrock that didn't get devil fruit title cards, I'd say it's maybe just a coincidence, but on 6 different occasions, Oda has now actively chosen to not tie these celestial demon powers to devil fruits directly, and now has actively contrasted Shamrock's revealed powers to Gunko's revealed powers. And I don't know about you, but to me this kind of sounds like Oda trying to say, hey guys, the celestial dragons don't eat devil fruits. That's like below them. They are straight up real devils. And that would obviously also kind of line up pretty nicely with Imu's view of his enemies. I mean, they do view themselves as the one true god above all, and actively call the D-Clan devils. But remember, Doflamingo, my dude here, was also pretty quick to point out how history is usually written by the winners, and my mind kind of tells me that this was very deliberate of a statement and is actually pointing to the fact that the real devils rewrote history, framing themselves as gods, and have convinced the rest of the world that the D-Clan, the half-moon people probably who follow the sun god, are the actual devils instead, which they probably are not. Now, the Harley does seem to line up pretty nicely with this messaging as well, as it says that men became gods after slaying the sun, so it kind of only makes sense, I think, that they'd call those that they defeated devils as well, and it's only natural if you've become god to do that thing, right? But now, before I move on to why this is so important to the endgame of the One Piece story, I do want to take a quick minute to analyze Shamrock's powers a little bit in more detail. Because, damn Oda, I mean, like, what you did there was not really cool, because I literally had just dropped a video about Blackbeard potentially being a Cerberus, and then you went ahead and gave this dude Cerberus summoning powers like 4 days later. I don't appreciate that timing, I gotta say, but I'll forgive you because you didn't fully deconfirm the Blackbeard theory. If anything, you've kind of given me a new idea about Roxy Zebek being a Figureland who maybe had similar powers as Shamrock. You know, the power of death itself. Because yeah, that's right. While everyone else is talking about Shamrock's sword eating a devil fruit, I'm kind of leaning towards Shamrock having truly terrifying demon powers, and they could actually hint at his father Garling's powers as well, for all we know. Especially, Shamrock could have demon powers based on Hades, the god of the underworld in Greek mythology, but that kind of feels almost a little bit too big for him. That kind of seems like top dog level power, and I do think that Garling might probably be the one who does have this Hades form, and it kind of lines up well with him hanging out in Pangaea Castle and overseeing the life and death of the literal celestial dragons as well. But so, if that were to be the case, what power do I think that Shamrock has? Well, did you know that in Greek mythology, Hades rules the underworld, but someone else actually oversees death and carries out those duties for him, which is Thanatos. He's kind of like this Grim Reaper character and falls under Hades in the godly hierarchy, and so naturally I think that this could be the role that Shamrock plays in the story. After all, he is his father's enforcer, the god of death, Thanatos, which would also be why he can summon Cerberus, the guardian of hell, as it's his sworn duty to enact his god's will by defending the Holy Land, which then would basically be Garling and Emu's will as well. Okay, but with that out of the way, let's just really get into what this could mean for the story potentially. We've now talked about what could be the true nature of these demon powers, why they seem to be separate potentially from devil fruits, and what cool possibilities are in store, but how will Luffy and the crew ever learn to defeat this ability? Well, I do think that my man Scalper Gaban that we met in the last chapter here has one job, and that is to teach Luffy and the crew potentially how to defeat these demonic powers, and that's why we are on Elbaf, that's why Scalper is right here, and it's also why Shamrock specifically showed up on this island right now. Because I could absolutely see Oda using Shamrock as a sort of test run for Luffy's devil-slaying haki. You see, generally speaking, throughout the story, Oda has this tendency to create and use villains as a very linear power-up tool for Luffy. They have an ability that he needs to overcome or learn how to use himself, and so after fighting them a bunch, he finally learns to overcome his weakness and defeat them with this newfound power. This was already true pre-time skip, but especially post-time skip, this, like, the same formula just keeps getting used. Doflamingo was too powerful with an awakened devil fruit, well, here's Gear 4th. Katakuri can see the future, well, Luffy busts out Snake Man to move faster than his future sight and then learns to read the future himself. And of course, the most obvious example there is Kaido, who Luffy had to fight 3 times before finally truly mastering Advanced Conquerors and awakening his own devil fruit as well. In the end, inevitably defeating the King of Beasts. So to me, it's only logical that in Egghead Island, we're gonna see a bunch of demons in the form of the Gorosei that Luffy could not beat since he didn't have the right powers yet. And I think we can all agree that they're probably also our first endgame villains to actually hit the scene, basically teasing Emu's powers as well. So now, on the island of Elbaf, the next arc after Egghead, we finally get reveals of Emu's true demon form and presumably a much weaker demon power user with Shamrock. And I'm using weak with like maxed out quotation marks here. But on top of that, we also get Scarpa Gaban, whose first words are, "I sensed very abnormal haki from the castle and came to square up with Shamrock himself." Like, this dude has been around the block and is now actively mentioning just how weird Shamrock's haki is. And that's really saying something coming from a person who's being framed to be equal to Rayleigh, the man who trained Luffy in haki. And so all of these points are kind of telling me that Scarper's role on Elbaf is gonna be to train Luffy to overcome Shamrock's powers. Because when you really think about it, he would be the perfect person to do so. He's been to Laugh Tale and definitely knows about Emu and the true history, and it's now also become increasingly likely that he might have been hiding the Final Road Poneglyph as the man marked by flames, and considering all of this, he should know that Luffy is the person to carry on Rogers, Joy Boy's, and Nika's will as well. And so in my head, the only really good reason that he would appear right now out of all times would be to really prep Luffy for the final war and make sure that he's able to take down his final enemies on and or after Laugh Tale. And in order to do that, he's gonna have to show or explain to Luffy some truly devil-slaying haki form, explain his true awakening powers, or give him a weapon like Nika's sword right here that we see in the mural as well. Who knows, maybe that's just gonna be the purpose of the giant-sized blade stabbing through the entire island, but regardless of what it's gonna be, it's pretty clear to me that Luffy and the crew do need something extra here to defeat those demonic entities, and Scarper Gaban is being framed right now to be the person to do that. Because only then, once they are truly prepared, will he show the crew the Final Road Poneglyph, I think, and send them into the true final phase of the series. Plus, let's be honest, he's probably gonna need Luffy to save his own kid if Shamrock's plan is to kidnap the children of Elbaf and take over the nation. And speaking of that, if you want to know more about that plan and what Scarper Gaban's other motives are, go check out my previous video on chapter 1139. I go into way more detail about Scarper Gaban and everything happening there, and as the biggest Scarper Gaban fan, this one was really special for me, so please go check it out. Otherwise, thanks so much to all the Patreons here. If you want to support the channel, get access to early chapter reviews, early podcasts, you know, we have like some cool guests coming up. You are all insanely awesome and really help the channel out a lot.